My mother was a wonderful artist. She taught me how to draw eyes. She taught me how to draw the real spirit in a person that can come through the eyes.
Starting from the very beginning, I know that you're of Eurasian heritage. Could you tell us a little bit about what that makeup is?
My maternal grandmother, great-grandmother, was from Japan, this lovely little lady, didn't speak a word of English, from Japan. On my paternal side, I had a wonderful grandfather who'd made cookies appear from behind my ear. But the reason I say that is because he was Long Tak Sam, who was a stage magician at that time in the vaudeville circuit. He ran away from China at an early age and eventually had this whole troupe of acrobats. He was a brilliant gymnast, acrobatic magician. In 1908, he met and married an Austrian maiden from a little village on the Danube.
How did your parents meet?
My parents met and married in Shanghai. So my mother was raised in Japan and was about to go to America to art school when the Second World War broke out. She went to Shanghai in the international zone, and it was in the international zone that she met my father, who was half Chinese and half Austrian. So they met and married in Shanghai, and then the war ended, and I was born in Hong Kong.
How long were you in Hong Kong for?
Only like 5 or 6 years in Hong Kong. Then the family moved to Japan. So there, and then when I was 7, and I had 3 little brothers, my father decided, well, we need a stable environment because I come from a heritage of world travelers on the move all the time or on tour. So my father settled us all in Kent, England, in Kent, where I went to school.
One of the things I picked up from reading your biography is that you talk about having a calling from a very early age and knowing that you wanted to be an artist. By the time you landed in Kent, were you already well aware that arts were what you wanted to pursue?
Oh, it went way back to when I first could hold a pencil. I was doing nonstop drawing.
Did you have formal art training during that period, or were you really learning from your mother and trying to emulate her style?
I was learning from my mother, of course. And then I had won a scholarship to art school when I was 17 to St. Martin's School of Art in London.
Wow. And so this is the mid-60s. You're an art student in London. That sounds very exciting, and I think being an art student at any point in time is probably pretty exciting, but particularly in London in the mid-60s. What was that like?
It was very exciting. I loved it. I mean, it was fascinating times. Revolution was in the air. It was the 60s. My parents, in the meantime, had moved west, taken my little brothers to move west, but I stayed in London to continue my studies of art. And I was surrounded by bohemians, these wonderful poets and other artists.
How did your parents, fit into this and react to the fact that you had a calling at such a young age? Were they supportive all along, or was it something that...
They were very supportive. My mother especially. My father was a little dubious. He wasn't sure how I was going to make a living as an artist, but...
A pragmatic dad is certainly something that I can identify with. I grew up with that too, and I think it's pretty common. So what was your life like as an art student in London? Where were you living? And
it's a little urban commune in Blackheath. Wonderful people. That's where I did my first paintings, oil paintings. And there was one I did of my friend there, beautiful poet with red hair. And I did a painting of her, an oil painting. Anthony Summers, who at that time was producing a BBC show called 24 Hours. He later became an author in his own right. And he wanted the painting. He bought it for $100. So at that time, I was also feeling restless, and a spiritual yearning was starting to awaken in me, and I really wanted to go east for enlightenment. So I took that $100, packed my sketchbook and an extra pair of Levi's in my little Afghanistani bag, and took off to Kathmandu.
That sounds like quite an abrupt departure from your studies as an art student, but also, that's... Nowadays, we refer to that as the famed hippie trail, that sort of mystical journey east towards Kathmandu.
I had a British passport at the time. I was born in Hong Kong, but because it was a British colony at that time, I had a British passport and went to school in England. However, having left the country for over 6 months and not being a native-born British citizen, I lost my British citizenship. So I didn't belong to any country.
Wow, that's quite a revelation. So essentially have no homeland at this point. How did that affect, your travels, and what What was your next move?
Well, God bless my parents. My father tried to get me, or he did. He was in the process of getting me landed immigrancy in Canada.
On this mystical journey, from art school to the famed hippie trail, and then a diversion to North America. Where'd you land for the first time in North America?
In the West Coast in British Columbia. Gorgeous landscapes. I mean, those majestic mountains and deep fjords. But the energy wasn't right for me. So
okay, you knew that right away?
Well, no, after a while, after I re-entered and scoped out exactly where I was in that environment and the energy field, it just didn't feel right. I needed something. It wasn't there at that time for me. Okay. So my father bought me a ticket to resume my pilgrimage to the East. It was.
It sounds like you really were quite successful at overcoming his pragmatism. After all, at that point in time, he's supporting your journey completely, which is great to hear. Go Ruby Lee.
But I had to change planes in New York. So I checked my luggage in the terminal. It wasn't very much. I was traveling light, and because while I was I'd never been to New York City before. I said, "Oh my God, I have got to visit all these places that Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan sing about in their songs." Sure. So I made my way to the village, and I'm walking through, and there's this incredible greengrocer with colorful fruit and fresh fruit and vegetable displays out front. And I'm looking at them, and I remember there was a huge honeydew melon, so it must have been October of 1969. And when I'm looking at the fruit and vegetables, I hear a voice behind me calling China. Well, in those years, all the international travelers would be called and addressed by the name of their country of origin. So I was called China. So the voice behind me said, "Hey, China." I turned around, and it's one of the guys that was traveling too through the Middle East at that time. He had an apartment in Waverly Place. He said, "Look, why don't you just come and stay at my apartment for a couple of days? It'll be fine." Another person I met who planned to go to California and asked me if I'd like to go with him. So, of course, I say, "Sure, California." I cash in my ticket, pick up my luggage, and he takes me hitchhiking from the New Jersey Turnpike across the U.S. of A. to Mendocino County and the redwood trees.
That's incredible. So your quest for enlightenment that was pointing you eastward took a U-turn in New York City, and actually you followed the United States hippie trail of the 1960s, which was to go towards California. So the uniting factor in all of this is the quest for enlightenment and traveling towards the promise of a new land.